This is not another stream. This is the moment we show up. Real talk, real truth, real people, ready to ride. No filter, no fluff, just raw conversation that hits where it matters. Welcome to the revolution of You Become You Live. Let's go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hit it! I just made that. Like this is like the third time I think I've seen it. And I love it. I love the music. I love the countdown. I love hearing my voice. I get tickled by it, and it actually gets me like excited for the show. What do you think about the intro?
I was too busy dancing, so I must have been moved.
Okay. I know what I'm doing is I'm coming up with different colors for each brand. So I have UBU Live, which is the flagship, and then I have UBU Live Cousin Talk, which is my family affair. Right. So I have a bunch of cousins I've never met before.
How cool.
we meet live just like this for the first time in 20 years or for the first time ever. And it's great. So that's on Saturday. So that one's gold. And then I have my thought of the day, which is red. So UBU Live is blue. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome, and you tell me how to address you. So is it Scott Mason? Is it S? Like what's your name?
Plain old Scott is just fine.
Okay. All right, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. As discussed earlier, we have never met before. We do not do a pre-show or pre-game.
Pre-anything.
Nothing pre. Everything that we do is authentic. And we just get on and just actually, just like if we met in a bar or out at a networking event, we just start talking about who we are. And so I would like to start with, how do you go from being an attorney to being the coach of attorneys? And what myths are we slaying?
Great questions.
Is it?
Oh, it is. It is. It's a rich set of questions, and that's what makes them great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I started law school right out of college. I was one of those kids that was good at writing and analytical thinking and speaking, or so I've been told, and didn't want to do anything related to math or quantitative analysis, and didn't want to starve with my English degree in hand. And so I ended up going to law school, figured out pretty quickly that it was not for me, but nonetheless did practice for a quarter of a century. Finally broke.
Wait.
Yeah.
So you spent 25 years in a profession that you knew almost immediately was not what you wanted to do.
I would even say that I despised. Yes.
Okay.
Just keeping it real. I moved away from actual practice into more executive and organizational oversight sort of roles. And that I liked a lot better, but it still wasn't fundamental to who and what I am at my core. So it was not a static place for a quarter of a century. Thank God.
Okay.
But it was a journey. I went into business after that. I went into co-owning a manufacturing firm, and then went into this current iteration once I had a business divorce with my manufacturing company partner. We had grown a lot during that time together as a company, or the company, I should say, grew a lot. And I initially got a roster of clients who wanted to have done to their companies what they had seen me be able to do with the prior company. But it evolved as I evolved, and as I became more and more keen on and intentional about stepping into who and what I truly am, trying to figure out what my unique message was.
Yeah,
And
your purpose.
yeah, exactly. And once I did that, everything else rolled out like a red carpet.
Isn't it? It's interesting because I get more fulfillment out of doing something that I love versus the money part of it.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I want the money part. Come on now, like I that helps.
Yeah.
But I don't. Not all money is good money,
Yeah.
and if you're not happy with what you're doing, if you don't find a purpose in what you're doing, uh, then you're just struggling through life for a dollar, and that to me, that 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 to me is not my purpose. My purpose is to help other people achieve greatness and to uplift everyone around me and to watch everyone rise. So being in business in with my journey, I got more pleasure out of creating the leaders of tomorrow
Yeah.
um, over my paycheck. So
We both know, though, that in business, if you are truly connected to your purpose and intent upon providing a legitimate value to those that you are here to serve vis-a-vis your
yes,
purpose, the money will come.
yeah,
And I have to add also with regards to what you said with regards to just working for the money. One of the beautiful things I like about being human is that we are fundamentally different than our animal brethren. Our animal brethren, by and large, exist to perpetuate their own lives and their genetic pools. And in order to do that, one of the two or three core activities that they engage in is simply getting food, getting sustenance. If you are working purely for money, in other words, for what brings you food and sustenance and nothing else, in a way, you're a more highly evolved animal and have separated yourself from what makes us at our hearts humans. And once you have stepped fully into your humanity, it's
yeah,
impossible to look back.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so let's talk about the Myth Slayer.
Anytime. What do you want to know?
So everything. So I watched a video, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it was the video that you shared with the man with the horns.
Ah, the Minotaur.
Minotaur. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So what is the Minotaur? What you kind of go through that entire reel, and what made you make that video?
Let's start with the last question first. William, I don't know to what extent you grew up with Greek myths, whether you liked them, not, were bored by them, saw that those two words ran in the other direction, or stared in front of the TV all day watching Percy Jackson or Clash of the Titans or whatever. But foundationally, the transformational framework within which I operate, and that is my purpose, relates to bringing these ancient stories to life as ways that people can see the glorious truth about themselves and act on them, those truths, today. The Minotaur was a character in Greek myths. He was half bull, half human, all man-eater. In order to avoid consuming the entire population of Crete, the island in Greece where he was born and raised, he was thrown into an underground labyrinth where he regularly was fed sacrificial victims until a hero named Theseus emerged who was willing to step into the labyrinth, wrestle the Minotaur hand to hand, soul to soul, destroy him, and end this monster's reign of terror. Why did I tell that particular story? The story of the Minotaur, like every Greek myth, is an allegory for something foundationally related to the human condition, spiritually and especially from a leadership perspective. The ancient bards who told these stories over and over for hundreds of years didn't just tell them for no reason. They told them because they were providing instruction manuals for the people that they were living amongst at that time. We've forgotten them as a society with regards to what they truly are. We may remember them as relics or the bases for Hollywood movies or Broadway plays or something, but we've forgotten what they're truly here for. My mission in life is to bring them back, to align with what you just said you do, William. Uplift people, bring them out, make the world a better place. There's a powerful synergy between what we do. It's my belief Greek myths are a truly unique and time-tested way to do that.
So, what is a myth?
Wow. So, you are an incredible question asker, I have to say, because you're asking all of these bombshell questions. I don't even know whether you're realizing it, but this is one of the deepest and most profound questions that someone can ask, and most people never bother to ask it when I'm discussing these with them. So I just have to give you, I have to say that about you. Thank
Also,
you so much for that gift.
you also want to say that Lanier loves me.
Oh,
Don't forget that.
one thing that's not a myth is that Lanier Johnston loves you. She made that very clear when she realized that the two of us were getting to know each other. And so, yes, you have a fan, and I think we're both fans of Lanier. That's not a myth either, is it? Is it?
No, that's better than that. Well, actually, what is a myth? So let's. You haven't answered the question yet, so I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe
I sure will. So, in common parlance today, a myth is a story that isn't true. Now,
okay,
taking that at the most superficial level, I would argue that untrue stories of the type that myths are actually contain within them the greatest truths ever known to humanity. But stepping back even further, what did our common use of myth as a word today come from? Myths are stories that were told by ancient societies. I focus on those told by the ancient Greeks, but Vikings, Native Americans, indigenous people everywhere, every society pre-modern times had bodies of stories that serve purposes. They usually involved the interaction between humans and the divine, and or humans and monsters, or the development of human beings into heroes of some sort or another. They have widely been acknowledged since the times that they originated, which was thousands of years before Christ, to be heavily symbolic. But what makes a myth and the nature of that symbolism has been the subject of heated debate for centuries. Some people argue that they were pre-scientific explanations, for instance, for natural phenomena. Other people argue that they were purely literary inventions designed to entertain. That's pretty obviously not true, but there are those that say that. Others say that they are the definitional and allegorical contours of a culture. If you believe in this set of myths, or if your society shares this sort of myths, well, that's what defines you as a culture. Others argue, and I believe the latter is true, with some of the following, something far deeper. The mythical, particularly the Greek mythical mindset, many have said, is one that draws deep insight about the human condition, leadership, and our spirituality from tales of the extraordinary, tales of the intangible, tales that can't be verified through external validation. They later were rejected by empiricists, the early Greek philosophers and doctors, who believed that the mundane, the things that we can calculate and see and measure over and over, draw us to the purpose and the meaning of life. A myth, I would argue, is pushback against that, is the understanding that who and what we are as a culture, but especially as a human being, is driven by that is unique, intangible, but nonetheless of profound existential significance. You wanted an answer to your question? You got it, my brother.
It was a good answer. Yeah, it was a full-throated answer, and I learned something today. And that's my goal, is to learn a little bit more than I did yesterday. So in Greek mythology, there are all these gods.
Correct.
And also there's a tie-in to astrology. Am I right about that?
The zodiac signs that we know now do come from Greek mythology. Absolutely.
Okay. So do you believe that as the stars align, and as we go from the age of Aquarius into Capricorn, that it actually does affect our emotions and our truths? Or do you think that that's all just garbage? Or do you like lie in the middle somewhere?
Thank you. I'm curious as to what you think about that, by the way, William. So when I answer, I'm dying to know what your thought is. I do think that thought and human behavioral frameworks like astrology persist and have persisted for as long as they have, for a reason, because some insight can be drawn from them. Modern astronomers would almost certainly say that the stars are too far away and are too randomly placed vis-a-vis the actual location of the Earth at any given millisecond as it orbits the sun, which is itself orbiting the center of the Milky Way, which is itself orbiting a cluster of galaxies. They would say that that's all too random to have any meaningful influence in our lives. That being said, again, I'm going to go deep here, but you wanted an answer.
I do.
There is equally emerging an area of science that, and it's, by the way, moving particularly hard in the mental health sphere, that what we perceive as reality based on our five senses is actually profoundly deceptive. There's an incredible book, I believe the scientist is from MIT, called The Case Against Reality. The argument that this scientist makes in the book, and that I actually believe for a whole other set of reasons that have nothing to do with this argument, but he nails it really well in a non-sectarian way, which is that in order to survive, there's so much going on in the universe that any species that is able to see things unfiltered as they truly are would go extinct, purely out of distraction. So the species that successfully evolve, and there are computer models that have been tested, and this is borne out by these models, species that only focus on perceiving the absolute minimum that they need to in order to survive are the ones that do not go extinct. However, that doesn't mean that forces at both a macro and on a super micro, even quantum level, that we may not be able to perceive because of the filters in our brain or flat out lack of capacity do not exist. What does this have to do with your question regarding astrology? We can't really know the answer to that question because there's so much missing information that we have due to the filters in our brain. But that being said, like I mentioned earlier, and again, tying this all back into a circle and leading to my question for you in return is, why have these beliefs persisted for so long? Why have they been so universal? Why have people not been convinced by the empirical evidence that they see in front of them? I would argue it's because the mythical mindset is so foundational. The mindset that draws meaning from what cannot necessarily be easily observed will not go away. It insists on pushing forward with and creating belief within humans for what it perceives as being beyond those filters.
That was profound. Before I give you my answer, we are going to, I'm going to give you my answer right now.
Good.
But I also lose my place, right? So I'm going to remind you, we're going to talk about mental health, and we're going to talk about opening up our minds. So those are two questions that I have for you that I know I'm going to forget. I'm a Cancer, and based on what I read about the mindset of a Cancer, it really does, like, I flow through that chart. I'm 100%
Wow.
wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm very, very guarded, which is weird because, well, I told you this before, like, I'm freaking out before every single show. And then I come on and everyone's like, oh, he's so extroverted. And I'm like, really, I'm not. I'm like fearful. And I feel like as long as I keep talking, then the fear won't set in, right? Because I'm doing something. So from an astrological standpoint, I believe that the astrological signs have a purpose, and that there is some consistencies with each sign, but is that something that's perceived, or is that reality?
Yeah.
So because I'm told I'm like this, is that why I find those things to be true about me? Because that's how Cancers are supposed to operate, Scorpios are supposed to operate. So that there's that tug of war between what's reality and what's my perception. And things get drilled into our minds about who we are and how we show up. And we create, in my view, we create our own realities. And that's why I believe that the things that you say are I don't want to say more important, because words without action is hollow. But the things that you say to other people, right? Things that you say about yourself, you need to be careful. You need to be careful. So, what I will say is, and I'm going to flip the script on myself. What I will say is, I am, in general, a wallflower. I'm the person that would go to the club and I would sit in the corner and watch everybody. And people would say, "Are you bored?" And I'm like, "No." I'm taking it all in. But I was never that person that would jump out on the dance floor and just start dancing alone. And I would always look at that one person dancing on the floor by themselves and go, God, that's a lot of guts just to get out there and do that. So although I do believe that I have that introvert piece of me, I am going to speak it differently. I'm going to say that I am someone who faces their fears and I overcome. And I do things that are out of my comfort zone. And by getting out of my comfort zone, I'm able to connect the dots better in my life, and hopefully other people will learn and grow. Going from that, so I answered the question about astrology. Like, I believe in it, but is it perception or is it reality?
Yeah.
The second thing I will say is I became super psyched about in March. I don't know if you remember this, but all the planets lined up. And I literally was like thinking, okay, this is like a code. It's going to unlock something. And this unlocking, this lineup is going to do something magical. So, perception or reality? Um, I felt like my openness to new opportunities became greater during that moment, but
Yeah.
perception versus reality. We create our own realities.
Yeah.
So was it the stars lining up? You know, the Pluto and Mars and Saturn. I know four. Okay, so and the sun and Earth, maybe five. Um, did that do something, or did I perceive that it was going to do something? So I opened up.
Mhm.
It's perception versus reality. So I believe in a lot of different things. I also believe that none of us know the answers. So there is a lot of learning and being open that will lead you to your truth.
Dude, that was profound. That was profound.
Come on. Okay,
Just keeping it real.
this is the boldest guy out there, and he's saying I'm profound. Okay.
Yeah. And you've got cool. I was going to ask you when you went out to the clubs, I hope you at least were when you were sitting in that corner wearing some cool glasses like the ones I always see you in. Because if that wasn't happening, I would really be disappointed.
Bro, I am a fashion icon.
Yeah, I know that. But I just wanted to find a way to work it into the conversation.
I really wish someone asked me one time why I do this. What was what was I doing it for money? And I haven't even thought about monetizing my podcast.
Mhm.
I do it because I just love to meet new people. But I'm going to put this out there. I think that Tom Ford should send me free glasses. Tom Ford, because that's all I wear. She just send me free glasses and I'll wear a new pair every day and I will pitch Tom Ford.
Dude, I'm going to follow your lead here. Vanson Leather. Vanson, yo, your homie needs some new jackets. And yes, I will promote you.
Yes.
When we get our sponsorships, we'll do another show just to talk about that. Will
Absolutely. Because you know what? We're speaking truth to reality today.
Yeah, and maybe Tom Ford and Vanson Leather need to do a collab, and we'll be the locus of that.
Hey, I'll do it. I'll do it. So I was talking about mental health. And I don't know which I want to go to first. So I'm going to choose the one that I'm most unfamiliar with, which is going to be opening your mind through microdosing. You did a show about ketamine, and I'm not sure if you were supporting it or not. I didn't get that you were taking a stance on it, but the person on it was in recovery. And he was the one that was speaking mostly about ketamine. But right now, there's a lot of people that talk about mushrooms and doing other things that open up your mind and do not have bad effects if you're taking it minimally. And then on the other side, we have don't get mad at me, but on the other side, we have Elon Musk, who I think is doing a little bit too much ketamine.
Maybe other things, but
and other things, but so do you have a stance?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
So the show that you saw was for a podcast that I host on the behalf of a company called webdelics.com.
Yep.
Webdelics.com is the WebMD of psychedelics and plant medicine on the internet. And I was initially hired by Webdelics because I'm an experienced podcast host. they felt that I had the right vibe, and I had at the time no real background or history in the psychedelic or plant medicine world. And so, as a regular person who was curious, I was a good audience avatar for someone who might be reading all the stuff about psychedelics that is coming out in the news everywhere and be curious. I would be asking the same sorts of questions that they do. And I initially, when I started that show, was and remained through probably the majority of the first year a neutral individual. And the position that I take as the host of that show is neutral because its purpose is to provide quality, uh, non-hypish information that's credible and balanced on this
Yeah.
very controversial topic. However, as you may know, maybe you don't, and I suspect almost no one in your audience, except maybe my homie Kenny, does not know. In 2023, while I was recording the first season of this podcast, by coincidence or not, I came down with a mysterious illness. Suddenly, it was like one day I was fine. Within 10 days, I was almost dead. Couldn't walk or stand. I'd lost 20 pounds. My body was shutting down out of nowhere. This was a pathogen that I caught that to this day is unknown. This pathogen almost ended my life. Frankly, if I hadn't been in such good physical shape, I'd be dead. During the run up to this illness that took me a lot of time to recover from, as well as during the time in which I was hospitalized and under very watchful medical care, a lot of other surreal and bizarre things happened. William, I would say that this event, what I call the illness, is the foundational incident of my life. And nothing that I have experienced in life since I recovered from that, actually since the day that I came down with it, has been the same. This does relate to your question. As you can imagine, one day being perfectly fine, bicycling all over New York City, lifting weights 4 times a week, having a healthy weight, being hyper energetic, the next day, 20 pounds lighter looking skeleton, my body shutting down on the verge of death itself for no apparent reason, catching something that was completely mysterious, was traumatic. As soon as I was ambulatory, I went, having learned what I did from my many episodes I had recorded at that point of the Webdelics podcast, I went on a facilitated by a competent shaman psilocybin journey. I will say before I go any further that I know that you, me, knowing no one or nothing associated with the show is endorsing any illegal behavior, and nor are we advising anyone to do any set of activities without the appropriate medical guidance or mental health supervision. So I just
That's that attorney in you.
That's the attorney in me, yes. And so I went on a journey, a sacred ceremony that was intended to help me understand and recover from my illness, and utterly, even more deeply than the illness itself, particularly because it was on top of the illness, my life, set forth my mission, changed my spirituality, and gave me the confidence to be who and what I know now that I am meant to be. So, going to the short answer to your question, I do very much have a position. I am an advocate, unapologetically. Now, I'm not these substances are of unbelievable power. And many would argue, including me, that they are portals into the providential itself. So they are not to be trifled with, and I do not advocate for just doing them as party drugs because you have nothing better to do, or abusing them, or doing them anything other than in a manner that reflects what they are, their role in human evolution, which there's a lot of documentation around, as well as the capabilities that they bring for those of us who feel the call and are willing to, as the ancient Greeks would with the oracles, ask a question, receive an answer. Does that answer your question, William?
It does. And I have another question for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this one's going to be hard. I'm not that smart. So when you say ambulatory, I thought ambulance, but that meant that you were able to walk, right?
Correct.
Okay. See, I like to make things like smooth. And then psilocybin.
Yeah.
Is that the drink that you take, and then you kind of go on this spiritual journey and have an out of body experience?
Not really, and it varies person by person, but let me get some language clear, and I'm glad you raised that because I want everyone to understand the message that I'm passing on, that you're diving into. Psilocybins are more commonly known as magic mushrooms. They are a type of mushrooms that have been used for mind expanding and consciousness altering purposes for millennia by human beings. And what happens if you choose them, as I'm advocating for, as a personal, spiritual, or leadership portal, is you find someone who is experienced, ideally in a lot of the indigenous based practices regarding these substances, but at a minimum, someone who is a competent and qualified mental health provider or has shamanistic training, not just your homie down the street, or not someone that did a mushroom journey and wants to help other people out. Ain't good enough. And then what happens is, you breaking it down, and there's a lot more that we could go into than this, but you create a set and a setting. The set is the intention within which you step into that journey, the question that you seek to have answered, or the purpose in which you are going into it. And then the setting is the actual physical surroundings that you're in. So you have an intent, and then you need to make sure that the setting, you don't want to be doing it in the middle of that disco wearing your cool badass Tom Ford glasses. You literally want to be in a calm setting. There may be music around there. You need to be in a situation that you trust. The mushrooms, if you're microdosing them, again, I'm not endorsing that, but if you are microdosing them, are often just merely eaten in little bits. But if you do a full sacred ceremony, mine was one in which there was a potion made up of these mushrooms that I drank. You then, for this particular substance, and I will speak about my experience, you then put yourself in a place where you are, I had my eyes covered, and I was guided through and walked through the vision that I experienced. I would not say it was out of body, although it was mega real. During the time that I had my ceremony, for instance, I had to go to the bathroom a few times. So I snapped out of the journey, went to the bathroom, went back into it. What was weird was that my journey had a very specific narrative arc. It had a visual color scheme. I knew, as someone that has a background in myth, that this was a particular genre of myth that I was living. And in fact, I would say that the relationship between the mythic and the psilocybin or the plant medicine experience is so connected that they almost exist on a continuum and may not even really be able to exist without each other. At least that's my personal hypothesis. But in any event, I would go back in and immediately pick up where I had left. It was as if the movie that I was a part of had frozen while I went to the bathroom, and then immediately picked back up. I left with, eventually, sort of the effects of the mushroom wear off, and you're if you're, that's part of why you need a guide there. You need to do something afterwards. So you need to appropriately prepare. You need to set your intention with caution and care and with guidance in advance. But then afterwards, there's a process called integration in which you talk about what happened during this journey, what came up, what you learned. And I had multiple integration sessions, and then actually later even worked with a spiritual coach to help me process more. The answer to the question that I asked was given. It was deeper, more profound, and more multi-layered than I could have ever imagined. Without integration, I don't know what would have happened to me. I would have been sunk. It was too much. That being said,
so when you say sunk,
yeah,
does that mean, because I was about to ask you, did you feel depleted afterwards? So is that part of the integration process, is to kind of lift you back up, or did you not, like, what do you mean sunk, or mean by sunk?
emotionally at risk.
Okay.
And answering that question, I didn't, and this is very specific to me. Other people, I'm sure, would say something different, but to give people a taste of what might happen, I left the experience feeling pensive. And this is why integration is so important. I had literally, like I mentioned earlier, experienced a myth firsthand. But it appeared as though the question that I asked, the intent that I had set myself upon with this journey, hadn't been addressed at all. And so I went to bed that night feeling sort of like, everyone else has their intention. Like, why me? Why am I the screw up? That's
Right.
why integration was so important, because I could not absorb and understand, and an experienced guide will help you be able to interpret what you saw. I was talking out loud through everything that was happening with my guide. And when we went and began to talk about this, and then afterwards, suddenly it was as if dominoes began to fall and the truth began to show itself. The guests that I've spoken with on this show, and this certainly was the case for me, William, will say the work that you have during the journey is just the beginning. But the real work that gives them their power goes on for many months, if not years afterwards. It took me a full year and a half to truly understand and embrace and accept the entire answer to my question. So, it wasn't just like one and done, and one who chooses to walk this route needs to understand that.
So when you did it for the first time, were you on like a retreat, or did you do it someplace and go right back home?
No. Yeah, I went to a location that was specifically set up for this sort of experience. There are retreat centers, and I have heard many, many good things about them. This place may host retreat centers, but my experience was a one-on-one experience, and probably for the best, considering everything that I had been through that brought me there. I did not go directly home. The person that I worked with advised me to go back to a hotel that I was staying at near this retreat center and spend at least a day decompressing and thinking and doing nothing, which I needed. I really needed. Other times people have these ceremonies and at their home, and they may go home afterwards, or they may simply, go to bed after their initial decompression session with the shaman or with the guide or the facilitator. Those are all highly individualized, but it isn't something like you want to do. I could not imagine, like, let's say doing this, Tuesday morning, getting your ass back at work at 3 p.m.
Right.
That to me is insanity.
Okay. Yeah. I would assume first there's a couple of things. So my dad was a heroin and alcoholic. So I'm very, very leery of any type of drug, only because I believe that there's that gene that I am more susceptible to becoming addicted to something because of him. So I look at my alcohol use and I don't really do drugs. I mean, not saying that I'm against trying a mushroom, uh, especially to kind of open up, but I wouldn't do it by myself. If I did something like you did, I would probably want to be at a place where it was more contained,
Yeah.
so that someone could walk me back. I don't know how you got up and walked, used the restroom, and came back.
They were there the whole time. Someone was with me every second.
So they walked you, like when you were walking.
The first couple of times they walked me to the restroom. The third time I said, I can do this.
Okay.
And I was literally in a small room that was nothing but a mattress, some other things related to the ceremony, and then a bathroom. So it was literally like me standing up and walking and then come right. There's no risk in terms of leaving. I did not and would not have gone home. I think you're absolutely right there. That's one of the things where it was the next day after an integration session in which the facilitator felt I was in a position to go home, that we even considered me getting a cab that took me home. And
Got it.
Driving
Perfect.
and things like that, that's out of the question.
Yeah. Okay. And you said it took you a year to really process
A year and a half.
all of it.
Yes.
So do people do it consistently, or is it like a one and done type of process?
It depends on the person, what their needs are, and what's behind it. One thing that I want to say, though, just to close a loop here.
Yeah.
My initial reaction when I began hosting the Webdelics podcast was that this is a drug. I don't drink. I don't do any illegal substance. One of the things that I learned, in addition to the history of why exactly plant medicines in particular were outlawed and sort of lumped together with drugs, was interesting. But they have a role in reducing addiction. They are used as anti-addiction modalities. So I do have to make one thing clear about that. And the other thing too that I personally believe with regards to plant medicines in particular, there is a difference, and a huge one that you're sort of indirectly pointing to, between a heavily refined and manufactured substance that leads to an altered state of consciousness that may not have any real function with regards to things like enlightenment or your spirituality or anything like that, but are more escape modalities, or like coffee, where they just sort of perk you up and put you in all of these sorts of consciousness altering substances are not the same. Crack isn't the same as coffee. Sugar, one of the most devastating consciousness altering substance in the entire history of humanity, is not the same as magic mushrooms. And so when we think about these plant medicines and conceptualize them, I respectfully but firmly argue, and this is why I'm an advocate for them, is that fundamentally they're not drugs. They're not heroin. They're not cocaine. They're their own class and need to be treated, I believe, with a different level of thinking, as well as a certain level of what you're talking about, even when you're asking these questions about how it's managed and like, do you go right home and what happens, right? With a level of respect.
Yeah. Yeah. I get you. I agree with what you're saying. I've just never like. So right now in Florida, what do you call them? Dispensaries are everywhere, and I brought a gummy, and I I didn't realize you're not supposed to take the whole damn thing. So yeah, like I was just like kind of like a vegetable for an hour or 2 or 3. But they also offer microdosing of mushrooms out here. And the person said, "Oh, do you want to try this?" And I'd gotten the gummies for my anxiety, So I do. That's why we're diving into mental health right now.
Mhm.
So I do have anxiety, and so instead of me using my pharmaceutical prescription for it, because I do have medication to calm my anxiety down, I was basically saying, okay, what if I did the more natural thing, which is the THC or CBD? I don't know which one I got, but um, I just don't like the effect that has on me.
And none of these things are for everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
Like that's an important thing to point out. I might advocate for them, but not for any old Jack or Jane off the street.
yeah. So it I'm not opposed to trying a mushroom. Definitely not opposed to it. I would just need to have, for me, I would need to have like the right conditions,
Yeah.
around people that I trusted, and around I calmness. I wouldn't want to, run down the street naked down my
Good for you.
neighborhood.
Good for you. And
You know,
neither would I.
yeah. Keep going up on the time it took you to get back to normal. Okay. Um, so that's Peter's question.
So the psilocybin mushrooms, when they're taken at the doses that are recommended for someone that is seeking to have some sort of sacred ceremony like the one I had, they last for their effects. You're directly in the experience, usually for a period of hours. It's not something that lasts days and days and days and days. Although I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientific expert on this. That is based on the information that I have, and I'm sure there are outliers in every direction. In my case, what happened was I drank the dose, laid down, covered my eyes, and it was very obvious when I was in. I knew it. I remember saying to the shaman I was working with, I'm in. But similarly, you also know when you're coming out. In my case, for instance, there were certain things that I saw. At first, I began to see before the myth began, but when I knew I was in, I sort of saw stereotypical psychedelic patterns in a very light red against a background, sort of like these geometric shapes. Then suddenly, I saw an aqua green card shape that had in it faces, 3D faces of all different ethnicities, backgrounds, genders, and some of them weren't even human. And some of them were grotesque, some of them were beautiful, some were frightening. When that popped up, I knew I was in. It shuffled and I saw more of those. Then the myth literally started. The story began. Once the story ended, then the card deck, so to speak, showed up again and it reshuffled. And then once it reshuffled, I was in this sort of like faded psychedelic imagery shape sort of mode again. And I was able to say to the shaman, I'm out. And so coming down was literally, I hadn't eaten in a while. I wanted to get something light and easy to digest. There was a fire nearby that I wasn't going to be at alone. The shaman and I he took me there and we sat and literally we just contemplated. In my case, I wanted to connect. One of the things that happens to many people, including me, is with psilocybin in particular, and many other substances, is you develop this profound sense of connection with other things in the universe. One of the times when I went to the bathroom, I saw a fly or a bug or something on the wall. In another era, I might have just, killed it. I was like, I can't kill this other living being. And so what I was continually seeking was connection. So I asked the shaman a lot of questions about his life. I wanted to know. That was my way of connecting with another human being. And we had this food and we talked, and then gradually I was really tired and it was time, to sleep. It was really quite late. And so that's sort of what it was like. The next morning, I was, from a perceptual perspective, perfectly normal. I had no, to my knowledge, sense of having been in any altered state of consciousness. Everything felt normal, except, like I said, until I went through the integration discussion with my shaman, I felt very pensive and very on edge because I didn't feel my question had been, I foolishly thought that my question had not been answered.
So when did you realize your question was answered?
I realized when I started off, the first thing that the shaman said was, well, how are you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling a little bit on edge. I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling frustrated. I didn't sleep all that well because we went in with an intention and it wasn't met. What I experienced, I did not, in fact, if anything, what I experienced was the exact opposite of what I had sought as an answer. And then we talked about it because he had heard the whole thing, and because I'd also written down some things that were of particularly seemed significant to me. He said literally, like, one thing about the entire ethos of the experience I had was like, you weren't paying attention to everything that was around you. That was part of the answer to your question. And then again, like a ton of bricks, reality began to hit. And it was like that, one thing after another, reality hit like a ton of bricks. The answers were given.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty profound, my friend. I'm still scared, but it sounds interesting. And, have you watched Nine Perfect Strangers?
I've watched a lot of stuff.
So I think that they do something like that on that show, and it's becoming more and more normalized.
Yeah.
And I guess when the time is right, maybe I will.
If you feel the call. But one thing I will say about this, that you're pointing, is becoming normalized. Why? Because all these drugs that we're giving people, these antidepressants and things, they ain't working. We're drugging ourselves up left and right throughout the Western world, and people are killing themselves and they're tearing each other apart. Because what is a lot of the political and social and economic division in the Western world all about? This leading to all sorts of troubling authoritarian movements. It's about a lack of connection within a culture, within a society. Again, going back to the theme of myth, the mythical lens is one that is inherently connective of human beings, because it's about going to the transcendental, the place that brings us all together. That is the space of facilitated, shaman-driven psychedelics. Historically, connection. Drugs, they may help people. I don't want to take them away, and by that I mean prescription drugs. But do they make you feel connected? If you're depressed, are you feeling less lonely because of them? Or are you having your symptoms muted? There are two different approaches. I think that one has real value for the right people, and goes to some profound needs that we have in our culture now.
Yeah. What's your view on the state of the world today?
Okay, and you're going to ask me, what is God next?
What is what?
God?
No.
Good.
No. Because well, what is God?
Right. I can tell you what a great God is. Do you want me to answer the state of the world? I'll give you my thoughts, but I'm curious again as to what you have to say about it. Because
I'm going to start. So
good.
I'm from Los Angeles, and I find it disturbing that we are deploying military forces against our own citizens, and that makes me nervous. I believe that there's beauty in everybody, and what makes, for me, the world special it's just like a great stew or a home cooked meal. It's the various spices that you put in it that make it different and make it better. And right now, I am nervous. I'm nervous. I think that the right to protest is a right, and I'm a little bit disturbed. You be you. You don't have to agree with me.
No, I just want to frame what I'm saying in a way that comes out as something other than to to use an infamous quote, is something other than word salad.
Mm-hmm.
We are in times no one would dispute of extreme technological, spiritual, economic, and social, as well as environmental chaos. These periods of chaos are, in my belief, necessary for human growth.
Mm.
We are in the particular set of circumstances that we are in, to some extent, I believe metaphysically, because we are ready for growth. Now, the choices that we have made individually and then collectively as a culture have led us to a particular place in which growth can be painful or it can be easy. I believe we have, for better or worse, made a series of choices, and this is not a sectarian or politicized remark because it goes across the culture. We have made choices that set us up for changes and growth that are and will be painful. Yet, if there's anything that I learned through my illness, as well as through the journey that the plants took me on, is that what we experience every day and should be mindful of and aware of and act within reason upon are part of, from a bird's eye perspective, growth. Those of us who are called to be there to help people transform, transcend, and to move into something greater that they may not even realize is within them, are there, I believe, to midwife the journey for those that are in need. If we were living in a time that did not require profound shifts, as well as profound, honest conversations with ourselves and others, then the purpose that you have described yourself as having, that I and many others would have no meaning. And I do not believe for 1 second that we're given calls randomly and for no reason whatsoever. My life has never played out that way, even when I was a stone cold, hard ass atheist that didn't believe in anything. Facts shattered that crap. So, is the state of the world anything approaching paradisical? No.
No, you know, I don't know what paradisical means.
Paradise-like.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sorry if I'm speaking in an overly affected language here. That's not my intent.
Paradise-like. Okay.
Yeah. Is it perfect or what I want it to be? No. Have we made the choices that have made growth and change easy for us? No. Will what is coming and what we have created be easy? No. Will there be suffering as we move? Yes. Is it necessary? Yes. Are you going to be part of making that change, of embodying it, being there, of shining light on those who are suffering? I believe you will, William.
Yeah, I'm getting beat down for it right now on LinkedIn. So,
Hey.
I'm I stand for everybody. You know, and I I stand for everybody in a selfish way because I feel like if I don't stand for someone, if I need something where someone comes for me, then who's going to stand for me? So I make sure that, I don't understand a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't. But it's not for me to judge your life, your purpose, your journey. And there are things that maybe 10 years ago I 100% wouldn't have agreed with, but as we know better, we do better, right?
Yeah.
So as we get more connected and as we meet more people and as our neighbors shift and change, then our minds open up and we're supposed to be, in my opinion, not I'm not speaking for anybody else, but we should be more accepting. That's my opinion.
I could not agree more.
Oh,
One
good.
thing, though, that I will say, and this is why, at least on LinkedIn platforms like this, I aggressively don't get political with very limited exceptions, is that the discourse we have engaged, and I'd be shocked if you disagree with me about this, but perhaps you do. The discourse around accepting what others think, it can be limited by our own vision as to what accepting and acceptance is. And so, and I'm not saying that this is you at all, because we haven't had these sorts of discussions yet. And based on everything that I have observed about you, I would be surprised if this was the case. But there are those, and I've experienced this myself, who, in the name of acceptance of others, actually slam or hurt others, and it causes a reaction. Or, in the name of opening certain parts of the mind, slam others. And so a culture of division and separation can sometimes occur, and it occurs both vis-a-vis those who will shut down people who aren't hurting anyone, have never done anything to anybody in their lives, but they don't like them or they look different or whatever. And then there are those who have a certain belief system around certain things and essentially treat those that feel differently than them as though they are less than human or less than intellectually competent or any of that sort of stuff. The reaction to that is only going to lead to more division. That's a lot of why I really personally am committed to hearing all sides and giving all sides the benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to philosophically where I'm coming from, and this, I would challenge anyone that I'm with, are you truly coming from a place of giving or receiving providential love? Are you a channel of radiance or are you a transmitter of darkness? And once one views things through that lens, some of the guises within which the divisions present themselves, to my eyes at least, and I don't want to say I know everything either, because one of the beauties about being human is how little we know.
Yeah.
But sometimes things become very, very clear in a way that may not fall amongst political lines or economic lines or other socially defined lines, and may actually even open the door for some constructive discussions that need to happen about a lot of the problems that are causing these divisions to erupt in the first place.
Yeah. So this took me back to something that occurred to me in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I did not understand. I did not understand. I don't know if it's understand or didn't know the trans community.
Mhm.
And what ended up happening is I moved to Florida for business. And had a corporate apartment and I had my two big fluffy dogs, and my neighbor was trans. And it's easy to not understand someone when you don't know them,
Mhm.
when they are a theory as opposed to a real human being.
Yeah.
And I would walk my dogs and she would, oh my God, your dogs are so beautiful. And I was like, this is a person. Like, what is it for me to understand?
Mhm.
And I think that when we don't know or open, well, if we don't know people, we have a preconceived, some of us have a preconceived idea of who or what they are about. And once you meet somebody and you recognize that you have more in common than what's different, um, and who am I to judge your choices? Um, I'm not gonna go out and I'm not gonna do it, but she's living her best life and was a really great human being. And literally when, I had a surgery and she said, do you want me to walk your dogs for you? And I'm like, sure, I'll come with you because my dog is really big. But I couldn't, because I didn't, like, they're Akitas, they're like 120 pounds. So it's two of them.
Wow, that is big.
Yeah, and I had an abdomen surgery, so I was kind of
Yeah.
it was when you're walking your dogs, you're using your core.
Yeah.
So I went with her as she walked them, and I picked up the poop, but I couldn't pull them back. But they would respect me more than they would respect her. So
Yep.
I wanted to make sure I was there, but she did the heavy lifting. So that's just my thing is once we just start communicating with each other, once we start knowing each other, once I allow you to be you and me to be me, and we can say, I agree with this, I don't agree with that, but at the same time, I love you as a human being. To me, that's gold.
I think that is coming from a place of love. I have had trans clients. I love every one of my clients. I love them for who and what they are, and don't want them to be anything other than what they are, so long as what they are is bringing them happiness, fulfillment,
Yes.
and
No hate.
joy. Right? So, on that particular issue, I understand that it can be easy to judge. It can be, especially because that community is small and it's emerging in visibility, that can be very difficult for people to challenge. And even if we disagree about something, well, is the source of disagreement from a policy perspective, from an interpersonal perspective, or whatever it might be, is it one that's genuinely rooted in love? Now, what I often find myself in social questions doing, and I do this to myself, by the way, because I need to hold myself to some standard too, and I ain't perfect. But
Are you
yeah,
sure
ask.
about that?
Very. Yeah, one of the things that is worth asking is, well, why, when it comes to my motivations? Why am I, for instance, uncomfortable with someone who might present in a certain way, maybe with regards to gender, maybe with regards to something else altogether? Why am are my actions as a manifestation of that what they are? Is it love? If I were that other person, would I feel loved?
Yeah.
And would the outcome of my actions or my words be one that reflects that person ultimately coming into a place in which they are experiencing the result of love. And so, for instance, if I am urging someone who I know who is having a substance abuse problem and homeless, if I am telling them, I reject your choices, is that coming from a place of love? If so, why am I expressing my love that way? And will my expression of that love lead to a place that is ultimately going to bring them into the greater experience of love? I would argue that I might think I love that person all that I want, but my actions, a lot of times in the scenario that I just described, are driven by ego, not love. I reject your choice is a statement around my framing. It's not one of love. It's driven by disconnect.
Yeah.
I will therefore not support your decision. Well, that actually may come from a place of love if supporting the decision encourages them to engage in it. And then are you feeling, or will my actions lead them to a place in which they're experiencing love? Well, if whatever approach I take with them ultimately helps them in whatever small way to deal with whatever mental health challenges that they're having and hopefully get that precious roof over their head, then maybe maybe it is an action based on love. But all of those things need to be, William, one thing that I ask what I call Providence or the Great Spirit every night is to help me in my sacrifice of my ego and of my fear. And
I love that.
Thank you by literally praying for that over and over and over again, I find myself checking. It's hidden everywhere. And getting used to and habituated to seeing where that happens. Again, I ain't perfect. I'll never be perfect. But I can more easily discern when my judgments, my actions are based on ego or fear, which is ego driven ultimately, or love.
With that said, I think we should take a 30-second break, come back, we'll finish out if you're good with that.
Of course.
30 seconds. Be right back. I'm going to leave you on. You can talk to. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. Does anyone want to come up and ask a question? Hey! So here's my question to you that I want to ask you all day. So how many times do people come up to you and ask you if you're Lionel Richie? You can't tell me it's never happened before.
And it hurts because Lionel Richie, look, I'm not 23, but I'm not 80 either. And it hurts knowing that I look like an 80-year-old.
You don't look like an 80-year-old. You know, one of the things that people have to remember, or you should keep in mind, is that people are remembering him from the Commodore days. They're not necessarily remembering him right now at 80, as you so put it. Peter, what is this you're sharing? And do you want to come up on stage, Peter? So they do.
Yes.
And you get insulted. Have you ever given
Well,
like
I'm not
autographs?
insulted because no one means it intentionally. I just happen to think, and I've always thought that when I was a teenager, I used to make fun of Lionel Richie and say he was the ugliest star ever to have #1 hits. Well, karma threw a boomerang at me.
No, you didn't.
Oh, yes, I
So
did.
you targeted Lionel Richie.
I was not coming from a place of love. I did
Okay.
like All Night Long and Running with the Night, though.
That was my error.
Yeah.
Like, you know, all night long. I don't remember loving Running with the Night that much. And they just recently did a joke about his song Hello. Do you remember that song?
Yes.
Where he's stalking the blind girl?
Yes. That like would never have been made today.
Yeah.
Ever.
Like I didn't think about it until like someone was like commenting on the video and they were like, look at here.
Right.
Hey, look, he's just like following her.
Well,
And look how he stares her down like a stalker.
It's sort of like that Donna Summer video from the 80s. She works hard for the money. It's sort of like this woman was working 5 jobs, and everywhere she went, this mysterious woman in a wig was following.
Yeah.
and at the end, when she falls and Donna Summer tries to help, it's sort of like, well, what do you think she would do, Donna Summer? You're
Right.
coming off like you're crazy.
It's yeah, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
I think we're doing better. One of the things, first of all, everybody, transparency. I had to pee like a racehorse, and I wanted to. So I had 2 options, right? I could have said, "All right, we're good, we're done," or I can graciously say, "Hey, let's take a 30-second break, and we can wind down in a more natural way." So. So that's that's the truth. But let's go back to the beginning of our conversation. The very first thing we talked about, when you were rather mean and said, Bill, you didn't have any pre-show data. But this is like, first of all, I'm joking.
Good.
Okay. So you weren't mean. But this, to me, if we had written out something, I don't think we would have like we hit on so many different subjects on so many different levels.
Yeah.
None of it, if it was scripted, I think would have come up.
Yeah.
Or a lot of it wouldn't have come up. We hit first of all, so you were an atheist, and now every night you pray.
Yes.
Okay, so that is taking me to a where are you?
What do you mean by that exactly?
So I'm spiritual. I don't focus on structured religions. It's hard for me. And it's hard for me because if you listen to the structure, if you don't follow this, then you're not going to heaven. But if you were born a Buddhist, that person doesn't get to go to heaven. I mean, I don't understand. And if the teachings are supposed to be all about love, then why do we use religion as a shield to protect us from other people? So I get, I was raised a Catholic. I went to all Catholic schools in Chicago, Illinois. And then my mom is a pastor of her own church, a Christian church, and my grandfather was a pastor. And what I have found is that I need to have my own spiritual relationship with God, and I need to make sure that I am living my life right and atone for the things that I don't know. Like I just said, hey, I had a preconception about a certain person until I met them and realized and it changed my life. And it didn't change my life about that one incident. It changed my life about not predetermining who someone is. I have gotten knowledge dropped on me from a homeless person. I was going to say that when we were talking about the homeless. And I was just like, whoa. Yeah. And I, why would I not think that person who has lived a life could teach me something? If you're open, you can learn from everything. You can learn what's right and what's wrong, right? So you can learn just as much about yourself by watching someone do something that's not loving and saying, I don't want to be viewed like that. Anyway, now I'm rambling.
I'm finding it interesting. What is it that you then draw from this religious background that informs your spirituality? And where in Chicago is your family from, homie?
So I haven't lived in Chicago since I was 12, which is about 20 years ago. And oh, you didn't laugh. Good. Thank you.
I was thinking, what did you do? What did you do? Right? Like move when you were 10?
Yeah.
Sort of like...
My mom, we moved to California. So I grew up most of my life in California, which is why I asked the question about what's going on in Los Angeles right now. Yeah. So we grew up on the south side of Chicago.
I used to live in Hyde Park.
Oh, you did? So I lived in Marinook. It's a small community off of 87th Street.
Okay.
And so your Hyde Park is a little bit further down Kimbark, I think, or Kenwood. One of those streets goes straight to Hyde Park. But it was a great community, and all of our neighbors were doctors or attorneys or teachers, educators. It was great when I lived there. I'm not sure what it's like now, because Chicago is like supposed to be like the shoot 'em up killing center of the world. I don't know if it's still like that or not. I know like 10 years ago they were saying that. But yeah, 87th. I used to go to Funtown. Do you know where that is?
Yeah.
Funtown for the kids and me.
Yeah.
87th Only Allen Avenue. Funtown. Anyway, so yeah, that was like a little. What do you call it? Little. It wasn't a real amusement park. It was kind of like
like an advanced fair is how
I
remember it. Sort of like a upscale or a permanent fair. County fair in the middle of the city that was always there.
Yeah, so you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And man, I don't know if I'd eat them today, but I used to love White Castle. I used to love it. I think it was off of Stony Island.
Did you ever go to Ribs and Bibs by any chance? Or Bibs and Ribs? I don't remember which was, whether it was Ribs and Bibs.
I'm pretty sure I have, because the name sounds familiar.
Yeah.
The name sounds familiar. And it's so interesting because I was a latchkey kid. So, today you don't let your kids do stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I went to St. Felicitas, which is a Catholic school in right outside of Marinook.
Were you an altar boy too?
I was not. I was not. I was super, super shy. So for
Kenny
me,
insists that you were not. He doesn't believe. He says you're lying.
no, no. So I'm refocusing, right? So I am tackling my fears. We're not saying that I'm an introvert anymore. I'm someone who tackles their fears. But no, when I was a kid, um, I remember someone would say that I would cry if someone looked at me.
Aw.
And, you know, people would ask me, "Hey, what's up, little man?" And I would say nothing. I didn't know how to answer that question,
Aw.
so I was always kind of like, I feel, stupid. So yeah, that was it. But I moved from there to Los Angeles, and then now I'm in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area.
I love it.
Which is
Good for
wonderful.
you.
Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on our conversation today?
As I mentioned earlier, I researched you before hopping on this show. And I have a sense of who you are based on your posts and videos of yours that I've watched and things like that. So I knew this was going to be a William Rochelle experience and not just an interview.
I'm going to clone that. A William Rochelle experience. Okay, so do you want to define what that means, sir?
No, because it's mythic. It comes from the space that can't be can be measured through metrics and KPIs. It is its own irreplicable thing.
Well, I'm going to take that as a good thing.
You're hearing it from the Myth Slayer, right?
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I'm going to take it as a good thing.
Exactly.
I'm hoping, and I hope we can do it again.
I hope so too.
Yeah, and
in all seriousness, the deep and profound, the multi-layered, the complex, the fact that every question was a trap door that led to a deeper and deeper labyrinth. We may not have quite got to the center where the Minotaur was sleeping.
Yeah.
But we were holding on and gathering the golden thread that could lead us there, and certainly will take us back out that trap door. Different people, simply by virtue of the fact that we chose to not just have a conversation, that you chose not to have a conversation that was just, oh, okay, what are your 5 pillars and what blah, 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 and where can people find out about all this sort of, crap that dominates a lot of these discussions. This was a real conversation. I consider it a privilege to have engaged in it, and those neurons that so many substances can send firing off in all different directions were completely electrified without having to drink anything at all.
You're fantastic. We should, when your schedule permits, we should go deeper into the Minotaur.
Good.
Not today, but you're right. We touched on it, but we should have just one complete hour where you explain in detail about the Minotaur.
We can discuss that and so much more.
Okay. So we'll do it again.
Thank you. I'd consider it a privilege.
Oh man. Okay.
Thank you.
And how do people reach you? And what are your 5 pillars? And those other things that you stated.
Well, we'll get into the 5 pillars today because that'll bore people. Definitely, that's something special that we'll discuss when we go through the Minotaur. But you can find me here on LinkedIn simply by hitting my pillar or my profile picture. And my website is myfreedomrocks.com, which I see you have right below. I also have a YouTube channel, The Myth Slayer, where I talk about Greek myths as the portals into exploration of leadership, life, spirituality, and more. And I invite anyone who's watching that to follow, comment, give me your feelings and feedback about anything that you might see. Also, if we're not connected on Instagram, William, you and I need to get connected there and then connect our own followings. And the Webdelics podcast, webdelics.com, is where you will have in-depth, that's not my main company or my main brand, but you will find in-depth conversations about psychedelics and plant medicines there, and they are well worth having if you're interested in mental health, spiritual connection, or simply a subject that's in the news.
Okay. I appreciate that. I will connect with you on Instagram. I will subscribe to your YouTube channel. I will get the notifications. All that stuff matters. It helps with the algorithm.
It
So you guys out there, it does. We're like, we're the small guys in the space, or at least I am. So
for today.
I encourage you to join my YouTube channel and subscribe and ask for notifications. And my bestie right here, Scott, go to his YouTube channel and go to myfreedomrocks.com and support him. And Tom Ford, and you are
Vanson Leathers.
Vanson.
Here.
Okay. Take
Homie
it easy, my
homes.
friend.
Take care.
Bye.